Okay. All right. Looks
Let's
like we're
see.
recording.
Good. Good morning, Aubrey.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm Barbara Bogart. I'm an artist in the Laramie Touchstone 2020 online exhibition for this year. It's produced by the Laramie Artist Project. It goes live online on November 6th. And I'm here this morning talking with Aubrey Lynn, who's one of the artists in the exhibition. And I'm so excited to do so.
Thank you.
So, the first thing I want to know about you, because I don't know you very well, is what is your medium?
Well, that's currently my medium is a mixed media approach using textiles, so fabrics and ceramic object usually.
Hmm.
Now the work for this exhibition is a little bit differently, but that's kind of how I categorize myself as just a contemporary mixed media artist.
And how did that happen? How did you get interested in that particular way of producing art?
Well, like many people, I was creative and I just liked making stuff. And so I was my grandmother crocheted and there was always a lot of like soft objects. I had this kind of compulsion towards just soft things and just
Mhm.
textures. And so when I went to college, I bounced around. Like I couldn't just like pick a studio. So like I would do sculpture and then I was doing metalsmithing and then I was doing just so many different things. And then I moved into ceramics near the end of my of college. And so I think it was just I had a hard time just picking one thing and doing it. So I think once I left college, I was like, I'm just gonna mix stuff and I'm just gonna gravitate towards things and put them together in a formal composition. So it's kind of, I guess that's kind of how I fell into the type of work that I'm doing now. There was a big change after I had my son and I went back. I took some time off. And when I went back, my work kind of shifted away from sculptural object and into more installation wall pieces, and
Hmm.
I kind of from there kind of gravitated towards a more kind of white neutral calm palette.
Were you using a lot of color before then?
I was using a lot of natural colors like greens and like pops of like purple or yellow or red. Like it was very organic colors, but all of it was very colorful.
That's such an interesting shift.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, we could talk about that the rest of the morning, couldn't we? But let's move on.
Okay.
Um, I think people think of artists as individuals who go and hide themselves in their studio and make art and then emerge into what their regular life is. But for you, how do you engage in your art practice in your everyday life?
Well, I it definitely has changed this year. There's been a big adjustment. However, I think that I take my art very seriously. Um, Not in that the art itself is serious, but I take my practice very seriously. So my son is, home a lot of the time now. However, well, during the making of this work, he was home. But usually, my husband and I we just budget for daycare hours, and when he's in daycare, I'm in the studio making.
Hmm.
And so it's a very intentional time for me to kind of focus on my career, and so that's kind of it's kind of set within specific hours, and I
Mhm.
don't really get to make art whenever I want. So I set a time, I go into the studio, and I at that point it's just kind of I let myself just kind of follow whatever I need to. um but the studio time itself is literally scheduled into my day.
Well, that makes sense for someone who's a parent and then that has to be something of a priority, right?
Mhm.
Um, have you been in the Touchstone exhibition before when
I
it
have
was
this is my
real?
first year. Yeah, this is my first year doing it.
Okay. How did you how did you decide did you make work specifically for the exhibition? How did you come to decide to be in this exhibition?
Well, originally, when I first kind of signed up and got involved, I thought I was going to continue with my previous body of work that was my poem series.
Mm,
And because I thought, oh, I'm filling a whole room, I have already a good start on this series, like I'll just continue. And then when it moved online, I was like, well, should I just make new pieces within that series? But my mind
mm,
really wasn't in that mode. I think once we quarantined, I was really struggling. And so I started to just respond to weird textures around my house. So I
mm,
started saving like coffee filters and I started like
mhm,
stitching into them and doing like weird stuff. And I really missed making these platters out of ceramic material, but I didn't have access to ceramics during that time.
sure.
And so I was like, how am I going to make this body of work? And I started this just like little daily process and kind of fell in love with it because it was very meditative. And so I just kind of blew it up. And then I started making these bigger pieces where I could just repeat a mark. And it was just me responding to, formally speaking, the oval shape comes from a lack of ceramic process. But then filling it in with these things processes I had access to and finding a way to just make and repeating the mark was just really calming for me because it made me feel centered, and that was just it was what I needed at the time, and so that's what I made.
Sure. So your art is really growing organically out of the present, in the present circumstances that we find ourselves in. How interesting. That
Mhm.
gives us such an insight into how to not just view your work, but how perhaps to absorb it. Um, and that leads me to the next question is, how do you want your art to affect the viewer? How do you want to engage the viewer in what you have done?
Well, I think that there's a lot of chaos in the world right now, and there's a lot of chaos on different levels, and I
Mhm.
think that so many people are struggling to feel calm or to feel quiet. And I think that my practice is what I need. And so I hope that when the viewer sees my work, it's not big, it's not flashy, it's not, another thing popping up on your phone. I want it to be a moment of quiet and kind of, I hope that the repetitive mark and the kind of radial nature of the composition kind of just calms people down, gives them that moment of peace.
What a, that's wonderful. And what a great vision for how your art can affect people in the world. I think sometimes artists feel like their work is done in isolation, but I think you found a way to make the connection between um, the uneasiness that we're all feeling right now and being able to find comfort in what you have found comfort in. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Any anything else you want to add to what we've already talked about?
Well, I'm really excited because this is the first time that I've shown any of this work.
Oh,
um, it was made in isolation, like you mentioned, and I'm really excited to share that with people, and I hope that it comes across. I know that there's a lot of very subtle textures that we're in a digital world, so it's going to be hard to see those. I really wish I could share it with people in person, but I hope that through the digital medium and viewing on a screen, it can still help people.
well, good. Well, we'll hope for that as well. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. This has been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank
Thanks so much, Aubrey.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day, Barbara.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.